I never imagined that a simple wooden footbridge, something I built with my own hands, on my own property, would turn into the biggest war my neighborhood had ever seen. But when you're dealing with a homeowners association, that behaves less like a community organization and more like a power-hungry board of self-appointed monarchs. Even the smallest thing can become a battle. And trust me, this one became a full-scale war. It all began last spring when heavy rains carved out a deep channel along the back edge of my property. Water from the nearby retention pond started flowing more aggressively, washing away the soil and creating a messy gap that was both inconvenient and a safety hazard. Every time I walked from my yard to the woods behind my house, I had to jump over a muddy ditch or walk all the way around it. So, after weeks of slipping, sliding, and nearly twisting my ankle more times than I can count, I decided to do something practical. I built a small bridge. Nothing fancy, just treated lumber, a sturdy frame, and a simple railing. It wasn't visible from the street. It wasn't blocking anyone's view, and it sure wasn't hurting anyone. It was just a bridge. A safe, useful bridge. But to the HOA, it was apparently a crime against humanity. 3 days after I finished it, I received the dreaded white envelope taped aggressively to my front door, bold red letters at the top, screaming violation notice. Inside was a letter accusing me of constructing an unauthorized structure, followed by a demand that I remove it immediately or face a fine of up to $10,000. $10,000 for a tiny wooden footbridge. At first, I thought it had to be a joke, a prank, some kind of misunderstanding. So I called the HOA office, expecting a quick explanation and maybe even an apology. Instead, I got Karen. Now, every HOA has a Karen, but ours? She's the queen of the Karens. The type who walks around with a clipboard like it's a royal scepter, believes every rule is a sacred commandment, and treats her authority like a superpower. When she answered the phone, her tone wasn't just condescending. It was like she was speaking to a rebellious child. "I'm sorry you chose to violate regulations," she said, "but the board will not tolerate unsanctioned structures. You must remove it." I calmly explained the erosion issue, the safety hazard, and the fact that the bridge was on my land. She didn't care, not even a little. That's when I realized something. This wasn't about rules. This was about control, and I was about to fight back. I wasn't about to let the HOA bully me into tearing down a harmless bridge that kept my property safe. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to bring one, calmly, legally, and strategically. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: HOAs rarely expect homeowners to push back. They count on intimidation. They count on people folding. But I wasn't folding. The first thing I did was read every single page of the HOA bylaws. It took hours, and I swear, I lost a few brain cells trying to interpret their overly complicated legal language. But I eventually found what I was looking for: a clause that allowed temporary structural solutions to prevent erosion, water damage, or hazardous conditions, as long as they didn't alter the neighborhood aesthetic. My bridge did exactly that. It prevented erosion. It made the area safer, and nobody could even see it unless they walked behind my house. So legally, I was right. I emailed the HOA with the clause highlighted. Their response: silence. 3 days later, another envelope appeared on my door, this time thicker. Inside was a formal notice, stating that the board had reviewed my argument and still rejected it because, according to them, my bridge was a permanent structure. They also increased the fine to begin at $100 per day until the bridge was removed. That was the moment I knew they were abusing their power, and I decided it was time to bring in reinforcements. I contacted a property rights attorney who had dealt with overreaching HOAs before. The moment he read the violation notice, he let out a long sigh, the kind people make when they already know this is going to be an easy win. "They're bluffing," he said, "and they're doing it badly." Together, we drafted a response letter demanding a full explanation of how they determined the structure was permanent, documentation proving my bridge violated any rule, evidence of board approval for issuing such a large fine, a complete record of the HOA's erosion management responsibilities. We gave them 10 days to respond. On day 4, things got interesting. I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside were photocopies of internal HOA emails. Someone from inside their board was clearly not happy with Karen's reign of terror. And those emails? They showed that the HOA had known about the erosion behind my property for months and had ignored multiple maintenance requests from previous homeowners. They also revealed that Karen had personally insisted on issuing the violation. To set an example, that was the moment the game changed. They weren't just wrong, they were exposed. And I wasn't stopping now. The moment I read those internal emails, everything clicked. This wasn't about a bridge, or rules, or maintaining property values. This was about ego, specifically Karen's ego, and a board too intimidated, or too apathetic to stop her. But now that I had proof, I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was about to expose the entire operation. My attorney almost laughed when he saw the emails. "This," he said, tapping the papers, "is what we call a gift." We drafted a new letter to the HOA, stronger, sharper, and this time backed with copies of their own internal communication. We demanded the immediate withdrawal of all fines and an official apology. And just to make things interesting, we also requested a full audit of the HOA's handling of erosion issues, citing their documented neglect. We sent it off, and within 24 hours, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Apparently, someone else had been slipping copies of those emails around, quietly, anonymously, strategically. Homeowners began asking questions. Why were community funds not being used for maintenance? Why was the board ignoring erosion problems? Why was Karen issuing fines that didn't align with the bylaws? For the first time since I'd lived here, people weren't afraid of the HOA, they were angry at it. The board called an emergency meeting. Normally these meetings were quiet, boring, and sparsely attended. Not this time. Nearly half the neighborhood showed up, and the energy in the room felt like a courtroom mixed with a protest rally. Karen tried to maintain control, but the moment she opened her mouth, people pounced. Why did you threaten him with a $10,000 fine for something within his property line? Why did you ignore erosion that could have damaged multiple lots? Why are you hiding internal emails? Why are you overstepping your authority? Karen's face went from pink to red to a shade of purple. I didn't even know humans could achieve. She clutched her sacred clipboard like it was a life raft. But it wasn't helping anymore. The room had turned against her. When they finally let me speak, I stayed calm. I explained the erosion. I explained the safety issue. I explained the bylaws. And then I held up the printed emails, the ones showing. Karen wanted to set an example by fining me. The room gasped. One board member immediately demanded the fines be withdrawn. Another suggested placing Karen on temporary suspension. Karen tried to argue, but the board president cut her off for the first time I had ever seen. "This is unacceptable," he said. "We will investigate this." The cracks in the HOA's power weren't just showing. They were splitting wide open, and I knew exactly how to finish this fight. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The HOA board convened multiple emergency sessions, reviewed the emails, and, finally, began to reverse their heavy-handed decisions. Within 10 days, I received an official notice. The $10,000 fine had been completely withdrawn, and the board acknowledged my bridge was compliant with both safety and aesthetic guidelines. But the victory wasn't just about me. The fallout from the exposed emails shook the HOA to its core. Several homeowners filed complaints against the board, citing abuse of power and mismanagement. Karen, of course, tried to defend herself, but even her allies couldn't ignore the mountain of evidence. The board ultimately voted to place her on indefinite suspension, pending a full review of her conduct. The neighborhood had spoken, and this time, it wasn't just whispers behind closed doors. It was a chorus of accountability that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, my bridge became something of a symbol, not for its structure, but for what it represented, standing up against unfair authority, asserting your rights, and using facts and calm strategy to win. Friends and neighbors started checking in, curious about what had happened, and some even confided that they had been silently dealing with similar harassment. The bridge, ironically, became a bridge in more ways than one. A connection between frustrated homeowners and the courage to speak up. I also learned a lesson that I'll carry forever. Never underestimate the power of preparation. Reading the HOA bylaws, documenting everything, and consulting an attorney may have seemed tedious at first, but it made all the difference when push came to shove. And while Karen tried to intimidate, the truth was on my side. And that truth, once revealed, was unstoppable. By the time summer rolled around, the tension had mostly dissipated. The bridge stood sturdy over the erosion channel, safe and unmolested. I could finally enjoy walking to the back of my property without fear of slipping in mud. More importantly, the neighborhood had regained a sense of balance. The board learned, painfully but effectively, that overreach carries consequences, and that power used recklessly is temporary. Every so often, I pass the bridge and smile, remembering how a simple structure became the center of an unexpected revolution. It's funny, something so small, so practical, and so personal could shake an entire HOA to its foundations. But that's exactly what happened. And one thing is clear: never, ever underestimate what a determined homeowner can accomplish when armed with facts, patience, and a refusal to back down. The bridge didn't just survive. It became a victory.